Welcome everybody to another episode of Oddly Specific Pop, the fastest growing podcast in all of YouTube. Over 2 subscribers and counting, AJ.
It's you and me. That's interesting.
Hey, but we get tens of views. I mean, a little over 10 views, but hey, it's something.
That's something. That is something.
We are full-blown YouTubers now.
We're on our way to that sweet, sweet MeUndies money. I'm never going to give up that dream. Never going to give up that dream at all.
I think at this point, maybe us moving to YouTube is a better step, because then if we do get sponsored, you can do an unboxing or a haul.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. A MeUndies haul. That's awkward. Like that time that my old employer actually got my MeUndies haul delivered there by accident. Damn you, Apple Pay.
See, and now it's a full-blown skit.
Yeah.
It's writing itself.
There it is. How you doing, Lou?
I'm doing good, slowly descending into madness, but that's neither here or there.
That's also everyone.
That's also everyone. How are you doing?
Same. But every day is an opportunity to not descend into madness.
There you go.
That's how I see it. That's my wisdom.
Exactly. Well, we are here yet another week, and this week is a special week, AJ.
Mm-hmm.
You know why? Because we are going to be talking about Star Wars.
Oh God.
This is our thing, AJ. You and I, big Star Wars fans.
Yes.
How many movies are in the Skywalker saga, AJ? How many?
9.
9. Big fans here. Who else could answer these questions?
Such an obscure question.
So we weren't able to talk about it when this came out because
Right.
I didn't watch it right away, and then you weren't able to watch it right away either. But we are here. It's after May the 4th, and it's finally on digital and on Disney Plus, which is the best way to watch it if you have a Disney subscription.
It's really the only way you should watch it. Don't subscribe to Disney Plus to watch it. That's not what I mean. I know it kind of sounds like that's what I said.
Mhm.
No, I mean you should not use extra money, especially in this economy, to
In any
watch
economy.
this. In a booming economy, in a recession, in a depression, no, just don't. Only do it if it's free.
Exactly.
Are already included in the package you're paying. But we'll get to that. We'll tell you why in a minute. But Lou, you said you had a little bit of news to cross before we get knee high into the weeds here.
Yeah, I mean, as everybody knows, the Rise of Skywalker was directed by J.J. Abrams once again. But apparently there's even bigger news because Taika has been, they got him for a new Star Wars movie. What kind of movie? I have no idea. But they got him a Taika movie, which is we'll circle back to this after we talk about the Rise of Skywalker, because I think it ties in beautifully.
Does it?
It does.
Okay. Oh.
I mean,
I'm riveted to figure out how, but yeah, okay.
As a fan of Star Wars, horrified. As a fan of Taika, horrified. But as a fan of all things pop culture, I'm a little excited.
We are going to be able to feed the content gods, and then hopefully the content gods will feed us. It's a full circle. An
Exactly.
Ouroboros.
Yes. So I have been bugging you, AJ, for the last, 6 months, right, about this movie, because I think I watched this movie a week or 2 after it premiered, and I couldn't wait to share my thoughts with you until you were able to watch it finally. And I waited and I waited and I waited for 6 months. And then the night of May 3rd, I couldn't sleep because I thought it's almost time.
I feel like this is a real mean thing to wait on and hope for one of your good friends to go through. I uh, we're obviously going to go through a synopsis pretty quickly, but just my goodness, um, it really took my breath away in the worst ways possible. And the thing is, like, you and I think that if folks still have copies of the podcast episodes, by the way, we're back on iTunes. Did
We
you know
are.
that? We are. It's official. I was able to download it and listen to it. So we're back on iTunes too. So this podcast is in HD and radio HD. Am I right? And the the thing is, if you've listened to some of our old episodes, you'd probably know that I had a lot of concerns, and I had concerns as someone who enjoys just the idea of Star Wars, just the concept of stars and sometimes some conflict, maybe a war or two. Like I really enjoyed the idea of the films in general, and even the ones that are not great. They always they never really seem to like anger me that much, you know. But like, I'm saying all that to preface that, like, I really wanted to be wrong. I there's no joy in being right about a train wreck. You know what I mean? Like, there's absolutely no fun in taking a lap on that, because it's like, first off, this is a thing that people really enjoy, and by the way, I enjoy it too. And so it's like, why would I want to dunk on myself, like, after forcing myself to watch a terrible movie? No one wants that. No one wants that. No one wants to be right about that. This movie was terrible, and it really, like, the viewing, like, I read all the reviews, and I knew what I was getting into when I watched it. But yeah, the reviews already confirmed a lot of the things I was worried about, and that made me sad. That was why I was trying to avoid watching it, just because there's no need you in this economy to put yourself through that extra emotional goofiness. Kind of a similar thing with what's it called, not watching Joker. Like, I still haven't. I won't. And I guess, unless by some stroke of miracle Disney ends up buying the WB and DC, and then all of a sudden the Joker's on Disney Plus. Hooray! Maybe I will. But yeah, no, it was bad.
Yeah.
And we're gonna go into a lot of it, but
Yeah.
I hated being right about that.
And I 100% agree. I mean, I am not, like, by far the biggest Star Wars fan out there. The first time I remember watching the original trilogy, like, watching it throughout, is like, when was it? 2014. It was right before the Force Awakens came out. So I wasn't like a legacy fan or anything, but I was excited for this, as I am with, like, any pop culture movie. I pre-ordered these tickets, or I got them ahead of time for I think it was Christmas Day. I think the movie came out like
That's
a
a
week before
Christmas
that.
Day. Yeah.
Yeah, so I watched it on Christmas Day, and so I went into it like I do with every big blockbuster, and I always think that if this movie at least is, like, okay, then I'll be happy. But this movie felt like a lot right from the opening crawl, and then let's just get right into it. So I'm gonna read the plot a little bit. So
Yeah.
this is right from the top. Again, once again, I am an encyclopedia of knowledge of all things pop culture, as we both know. So the movie goes: following a threat of the revenge by the revived Emperor Palpatine, Kylo Ren obtains a Sith Wayfinder, leading him to the uncharted planet of Exegol, where he finds Palpatine, who reveals that he created Snoke as a puppet. And this is within the first 5 minutes. So AJ, I'm really curious on, because I kept pointing to these first 10 minutes of the movie. What did you think of these 10 minutes of opening of this movie? Because it kind of sets the tone for the entire film, because it's not like a continuation of the last movie. It's kind of a new story.
I had a lot of thoughts, and you're right. I think that it does set the tone for the rest of the film, because I feel like all the critiques that I have throughout the movie exist in these first, in sort of this uh, expositionary period in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, First, the sequences are, they would be fine. I thought it was interesting that so much of it was very show don't tell. That's a huge, like, sort of filmmaking when you're trying to shift. Like, a lot of my writing work, almost all my writing work, is done entirely in, sort of in prose, like not meant for translation to screen, you know. And so when I've been trying to sort of like dip myself into sort of like radio play, and then especially like teleplay and screenplay, like I've been trying to find myself like shifting out of the spaces that like would be dialogue sometimes, or maybe like really heavy exposition where it's like third person omniscient, you know, sort of like trying to paint the environment. Let the camera do the work for you on
Mm-hmm.
those things, right? And so the lack of dialogue was interesting to me because I was like, oh, okay, so they're really gonna try and give you something that's uh, less less dialogue heavy for the exposition scenes. Cool. This is gonna be a challenge, but that's neat. Like, I appreciate them trusting the audience. That's cool. Um, but then, like, that carried over for so long, and then the dialogue that we were given was so weird. Um, and it almost felt like he had to fill in gaps that didn't exist. Or okay, maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it this way. If there was a movie before this film that it was heavily trying to reference, then fine, you could fill in that gap, because you just had The Last Jedi to reference. You just had The Force Awakens. You had every single movie before it. But because it went out of its way to not reference The Last Jedi,
Mm-hmm.
it was like all the questions that could have been answered by admitting and acknowledging what happened in The Last Jedi, we could have filled in. But we couldn't, because none of those things made sense. Like, if you were going to reference The Last Jedi, the outcomes that existed in The Rise of Skywalker don't make sense. They don't follow. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, trying to like resolve the way these characters are interacting with each other when you've got a giant void, sort of in the narrative, because I mean, and it's not just like, as we go through the whole film, we'll talk about the ways in which J.J. Abrams doesn't just deviate from TLJ, but literally unwrites that film. It
Mm-hmm.
almost tries to write it completely out of canon, which, whew, that's a choice, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But that's sort of like one of the big things. So yeah, so first was the sort of lack of dialogue, which points to the rewriting of TLJ. And then, so if we're gonna like retcon an entire movie, why not retcon the entire franchise? You know? And so that's what they did with the entire Palpatine bit. First off,
Mm-hmm.
somehow Palpatine returned. I finally get it. And also, I'm annoyed at it, because that was a really egregious line of dialogue to exist among many in this film.
Mm-hmm.
And then the thing for me, and I was having a long conversation with good friends about this the morning after I watched it, was, did they rewrite, like, was, if there were only ever two Sith at the same time, how's Palpatine existing, Snoke existing, and um Kylo Ren? Like, none of that makes sense, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in the lore of its own universe. And so, like, I mean, we have a lot of other things that we're going to go on, but those were like such fundamental problems that I genuinely found myself like struggling with. the whole thing. So those were like it within the first like 20 minutes of the film. Um, those were the things that just were popping in my head. Like I was just like, this is bonkers.
Yeah, no, I agree because when I originally watched it, the first thing that kind of I felt jarring right off the bat was just the opening crawl. Like was it was a mess. In the first line, I think it's the dead speak, and then the first line of actual dialogue is Kylo Ren addressing Palpatine, and the first line is, "I killed Snoke, I'll kill you." And then I thought, "Oh no!" As it, that little bit of dialogue to me showed how clunky it was already being shown because as he goes into the tomb for the first time, you see like a bat of Snokes, which when you mentioned show don't tell, they both showed and told you that Snoke was no like it's not a
It
big
was
deal
like a
that he got
clone.
yeah he's like he got killed last in the last movie, but he wasn't even a big bad guy. He was just a clone, or he was like a puppet for the real villain, which is Palpatine, who has been here the whole time. Like if they would have referenced it in the last movie, I guess if for whatever reason Ryan Johnson said at the end of the movie ended with the hope and then cut to like Palpatine somehow is here, or you just hear his voice. Okay, there's that little nugget that was left, and then now you can kind of take it into its own thing and bring Palpatine in. But even then, it just feels so out of place. And what bugs me about this movie the most is that the Force Awakens happened. And, I liked it quite a bit. I thought it was a fine movie. Not amazing by any means, but I liked it fine. And the big criticism of that movie was like, oh, it's too much trying to be A New Hope, right? So they brought Ryan Johnson, who wanted to do something different, and that was like his big thing, right? Just taking Star Wars in a way that it hasn't been done before. Granted, I don't think The Last Jedi is the best movie ever made either, but it took some risks, right? And this movie feels the same way, that there was a loud group of people who were giving criticisms about The Last Jedi, and Disney's like, okay, well, we'll take what we learned from The Last Jedi and take it into this movie. So progressively, they were learning the wrong lessons as each movie went along, and I think the big mistake is not having an actual plan to go through, because by the time it got to the third one, it was a giant mess, because a lot of this movie felt like J.J. Abrams was trying to appease loud fans of the series. So this movie to me felt like a watered down version of what Star Wars is. And granted, I don't think I have a really big understanding of what Star Wars is, but it really felt like if this is for the fans, it also seems like they are shortchanged, or it's also not for them. So this movie just felt very clunky, like very, very clunky. And I think maybe me knowing that Chris Terrio wrote this movie, maybe it made me look for things in the script that maybe I wouldn't have noticed before. But the script, it's all over the place as well. So I don't know. I think the redeeming qualities in the movie maybe are the leads. And again, I think it's just because of the actors and not so much the writing. So I enjoyed watching Poe, Finn, and Rey in this movie, but I feel like I was enjoying John Boyega and Oscar Isaac and Daisy Ridley being on screen, not so much the characters.
Yeah, it's tough. The thing about like what I think Disney's mistakes are here, and I'd echo not having a plan, but I would say that the big problem is I think that they chose to sort of hitch their wagons to J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams isn't necessarily a bad director or even a bad writer, but I do think that he struggles with crafting the necessary work into the universes and the places that he builds to sort of have the beats that he wants to have pay off. And I say this because, the note about the fans is interesting. this film is very fan servicey, very fan servicey, like in almost every way possible. Um, how is it that Ben? Okay, first off, Kylo Ren somehow makes it back from the dark side, or that again, that's kind of left open ended. We don't know if he ever fully turned or not, right? Um, supposed to be mimicking Vader. We never got enough of Kylo Ren to understand if he was as good at the Force as Vader ever was. Never, never. We knew that he was kind of special, especially in The Force Awakens. We saw kind of how good he was in the way that he like defeated Snoke, but he also needed help with Rey for that. You know, and we knew that he was always in constant tension. So the idea that he ever turned back from the dark side or fully went to the dark side, that's kind of up in the air. And so then his redemption feels weird. Like, why is it so momentous if he doesn't quite get there? You know? So there's never the full investment in the character ever being as bad as he could be. And so we never really get to relish in any kind of redemption, at least for me. Number two, the redemption is cheap to begin with. You know, I know that they had to, I say had, they didn't have to. They used a lot of pre-filmed scenes and sequences to keep Carrie Fisher in the film. Honestly, I don't know how she'd personally feel about it. The sequences were bad, and then they also used a sequence with her as sort of like the big reason for why Kylo Ren turns, and it is so bad. It is embarrassingly bad for a professional writer. It's quite literally Leia projects her voice into the space where Kylo Ren is and whispers the name Ben. If that was all it would have needed, why didn't it work in The Force Awakens? Why didn't it happen in The Last Jedi? And I understand that part of this, again, is sort of like, well, sometimes you got to suspend disbelief. But I mean, the whole movie's so schlocky to begin with. Like, at some point, you gotta pay attention to the film that you're building in order to make this moment count, right? This is a fan service moment. Some fans wanted to see Kylo be redeemed. Okay. And by the way, the only way the final scene between he and Rey works is if he's redeemed, because otherwise you have Rey making out with a space Nazi. So like, these are things that are very fan servicey, and it should have made fans happy. But the way that you got there was so broken and so haphazard.
It felt like they tripped all the way to the finish line. Like, the more it went along, the more it felt like they were just trying to get there, and they will get there however they could, right? And yeah, I agree with the scenes with Carrie Fisher. They just seem so. You know, there was a lot of talk of, you know, when she passed away, they were gonna just do CGI her face onto another actor and just keep on rolling with the movie or whatever. And they're like, no, that would be too disrespectful. Like, obviously, we're not gonna do that. But then they did this, and then I thought, was it really worth it? You know, you could have done something. It just felt so awkward and weird, and the lines that they were able to pull from other movies were very I don't know, it was very obvious that they were not working. I mean, the visuals look great. I mean, this movie from start to finish, it looks great. So that's why it bums me out how bad the story is, because everybody involved behind the scenes and in front of the camera, they're trying their hardest, but then people that are in charge are kind of they're making this movie for a certain kind of person instead of just trying to make a good movie. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I don't know enough about. I mean, I feel like it is a pretty easy read to say that they bought into the folks who did not like The Last Jedi. But I also don't know that they changed direction between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that that was the pattern. Um, I think Disney just made a mistake going back to JJ. Like,
Yeah.
maybe they didn't like the treatment that Ryan Johnson was doing with, was it Trevorrow's script? And so maybe they pivoted. Um, I mean, honestly, if they were gonna stick with multiple directors the whole way, they probably should have just done that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's either one director the whole way, or you gotta get someone who can land, you know, what Ryan Johnson puts up there.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, like, the cool thing about what happened with The Last Jedi is, for all of its flaws, Ryan Johnson left enough strings up there for people to grab onto, you know. um, JJ refused to take any of them. That's the part that's very difficult, because
Mm-hmm.
you can't write a script like this that is supposed to be referential to everything else if you refuse to acknowledge, what is it, 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours of film that involves characters that only existed in that previous film.
Mm-hmm.
Rose makes no sense. Like, her
Well,
characterization is entirely different in this film.
yeah. I mean, and
It doesn't make sense.
I tried watching this movie again today, and I just kind of watched it in parts because I just couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
The more I watched, the more I kept getting upset about it. Because especially, it's really early in the movie, right? So they're back at the base, and they're like, "We're all gonna go with you, Ray, to your mission to find the Wayfinder or whatever." And then they're like, "We're all going except for Rose because she has homework, and she's gonna stay here in the base, and we're all gonna leave because Rose needs to be here for some reason." Even though it was established in the last movie that she was part of the ensemble, those are the parts where I thought, okay, this is very much a direct response over what people didn't like about the Last Jedi, because there was a lot of criticism on that character, and they just kind of want to write her off. And at the end of the movie, when they have all those star destroyers come out of nowhere, she also gets shortchanged. And isn't she supposed to be like a star destroyer expert? Like she was a big part of the last movie. The reason they were able to figure out how to get into that destroyer is because of some insight she had working in with ships. So why aren't you utilizing that character even in this little bit? So it was like it felt very on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that it would read that way. I always felt that it was going to be very hard to sort of weave in a character like Rose, especially when you were trying to, again, fan service, trying
Mm-hmm.
to like weave in a new character like Jana and hint that she's related to Lando, maybe. You know, like, you have so many moving parts, you know, in this film. um and again, JJ just wanted to continue to also like introduce some more. And Palpatine, there was nothing about Palpatine that existed that made sense, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in this, you know. And I think the only reason Palpatine exists is because they needed to redeem Kylo. And I don't think they needed to redeem Kylo personally. Um, but if they had to, I don't think they even needed Palpatine to do it. Kylo had made choices all the way through. He killed his own father, you know? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I I don't know that he needed Palpatine to exist in order to drive him. And it's really weird because the whole thing is supposed to stem from his feeling of betrayal with Luke, you know, back
Mm-hmm.
in training. And yet this film says that it's because Palpatine was the cause of everything. Like, what? how do you mix up the motivations of the character that you created the motivations for in the first film?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that doesn't make sense. And so, I feel like, yeah, the Rose stuff is really not good, but I also always felt that Rose was going to have a hard time existing in this film,
Mm-hmm.
because they had to tie up so many things. Um, and so I always expected she'd be relegated to really small roles.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make it better, but
Well, I
the
mean,
the
what's
fact that
surprising to me is that, this is such a big movie and it's full of new characters. So if there's not enough things for characters from previous movies, especially in the last movie, to do, why introduce two new characters in this
right,
movie? So
right,
if there's enough dialogue or enough for other people to do, why don't you give that to other characters that are already established? What I did like about this movie is C-3PO is the best he's been in a while, especially in
mhm,
this new trilogy. I like that, but it just felt like some of the other characters were really shortchanged. And again, I wasn't a huge fan of like the Rose character, but I like that it wasn't all like Jedi's and Siths. Like there's also smaller, people in the Resistance being put into these type of situations. And I don't know, it felt weird because there was so much of this movie that I didn't like because of The Last Jedi, and not because I think The Last Jedi is a perfect movie, but I really like those like big points, right? So it's not even something that's established in the Last Jedi. Like Kylo Ren, he's had chances to be redeemed every step of the way, right? From The Force Awakens all the way to The Last Jedi, and every single time he's chosen the dark side. And so, but at the end of The Last Jedi, he's fully gone. He's had his opportunities all step of the way. And then on Rey's side, she wants so much to know where she came from the Force Awakens all the way to the Last Jedi. So she wants to be like a Solo or a Skywalker. She wants to know who she's from, and it turns out she's from nothing. She's nobody, which I think really I thought it was a great way to take the Force, because before the Force was lineage and who your family, and you have to be special to be powerful in the Force. And then in The Last Jedi, it turns out, no, it doesn't matter where you're from. Anybody could use the Force, and the Force is in everything. Like, isn't that what George Lucas is always saying? Like, the Force is in everything, it's in everybody. And then this movie turns out like, no, none of that is true. It does matter who your family is. You have to be special to use the Force. That is just the weirdest thing to me, because it was set up so great. Like, it was a great setup. Now take it somewhere. Like, you don't have to use
right.
any of the material. You can just take it somewhere else.
Well, no, but that's what I'm saying, is that it's like my read is not so much that Disney forced JJ to do this. I think JJ hated Ryan Johnson's script, and maybe he's hated Ryan Johnson. I don't know. Like, my conspiracy theory, he hates Ryan Johnson. It's the only thing that can explain how much he took a crap on The Last Jedi. That's basically what this entire movie is. Like,
You know,
it's like everything that we could have established in The Last Jedi, gone, gone, gone. Kylo Ren is still someone that can be turned. No way, not by the end of The Last Jedi. And yet here there's a chance. What? Like that's the kind of stuff that was probably the most infuriating for me, because it was
mhm.
clear the lack of regard that this film had for its predecessor. And that's one of those things where it's kind of like, then why a trilogy? You should have just made it two movies.
Yeah.
You could have done this exact film right after The Force Awakens, and no one would have known the difference. You know,
Hmm.
um, we're lucky to have The Last Jedi so that we can watch it and pretend that that's where the series ends. But what I'm saying is, like, the whole thing about like what motivated these changes. Yeah, I think that there were a lot of loud people, and it's possible that colored some of the decision making around it. But it took J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio to write this script and then make the conscious decisions they did to basically say, yeah, no, none of that, none of this is true. And then to
Hmm.
bring Palpatine back, like, what? In what
Yeah.
world? In what way does this make sense? So I don't know, man. I was I was really let down. I got done with this film and I was just like, oof,
And what I find
sad.
fascinating in this movie is the fact that this whole movie, Ray is a protagonist, right? So like for this whole movie, you're kind of with her, but it doesn't feel like it's her movie. It feels like it's like we're gonna get Kylo Ren, who's the big bad guy, and we're gonna get him to a place where he's redeemed and he's back with the Jedi, and we'll use Ray as a excuse to get him there, which really shortchanged that character. When the Force Awakens started or it came out, I was like, oh, this is a great character. It's a great way to restart the franchise. I liked all of them. I like Poe, I like Finn, and every step of the way, all these characters get shortchanged for the bad guy, and I don't know, that whole relationship between the two just creeped me out.
Mm-hmm.
It was the weirdest thing, and I mean, throughout the movie, I was already like halfway through. I was like, I can't wait for this to be over. It's like this can't possibly get any worse, and then the thousands of ships came, and I was like, well, this can't possibly get any worse, and then the thing from the Avengers Endgame movie happened here, where everything's going down the drain, and then suddenly on your left, everybody from every ship from everything has ever been is here all at once. And then I
Mm-hmm.
thought, well, this can't possibly get any worse. And then they kiss at the end. And then it felt weird because throughout the movie, even throughout this movie, it didn't feel like there was like a romantic relationship being built. You know what I mean? It didn't feel like it. So even if that was the end goal to get them to kiss, it felt weird that that's where it ended.
I saw it coming because the not because it was well done, but because it felt really heavy-handed, and because of how they were trying really hard to go out of their way to keep Finn and her separated. Like it was it was to the point it was to the point that I was like, is this like Jim Crow segregation? Like I'm really confused with what's happening in this moment here. Like
And
why are
well,
they
and you're right. In hindsight, you're right because they did the that with Finn, and then they did the same thing with Poe. They're like, just in case you had any inclination that Ray was gonna go with either Poe or Finn,
right?
we're partnering
Here's
them up.
Zuri. Well, they didn't even partner Finn up. It was weird. Like it was clear that Finn had feelings for Ray. And I think someone was telling me that JJ was trying to explain that the secret that Finn wanted to
Oh
share
yeah,
was that he's force sensitive. It did not read that way.
it makes no
Like
sense.
it read like your typical like we're in danger, we're about to die. I'm deeply emotionally connected to you, so I can just kind of sense, like that something's not right, and so I'm just constantly anxious about you, you know
Mm-hmm.
and so like especially because they've established that they've had chemistry, and so
Mm-hmm.
like the fact that it doesn't like one of my complaints was that like Finn was like the one character that it was clear everyone in the universe wanted to hook up with. Like Poe wanted to hook up with Finn, Rose wanted to hook up with Finn, Ray wanted to hook up with Finn, Kylo probably did too. He was just wearing the mask, so we couldn't tell. And so it's like everyone wanted to hook up with Finn, and Finn didn't even get a kiss in this damn thing. Like he gets off the ship, he's looking around for Ray, he sees Rose celebrating with someone else and like looks wistfully, and that's not really ever explained, except I think we're just supposed to say like Finn recognizes that's not where his future lies. But then you get the closing scene with Ray back on Tatooine and at the Skywalker farm, and she's alone.
Well, yes. I mean, there's a lot of problems with that too, because not being a big Star Wars fan, I know for a fact in these trilogy or this saga of movies that one Luke Skywalker hated being on Tatooine. He wanted to get out of there. He didn't want to be there. He wanted to go out in the galaxy, and then Leia had no emotional or physical connection to Tatooine.
Yes, yeah, because she was
Why?
never raised there.
why in the hell does is she taking those lightsabers there? And yeah, exactly. The last shot of the movie is Rey alone, like how she started. That's the most depressing thing.
It, I was trying to explain this to myself. So there are two things that I'm wondering, neither of which I think is good or quality storytelling. uh, I will say, with Leia, where would you put that lightsaber? You know, this is the last piece of Skywalker property. You know, um, I don't know. Bury it next to Han, I
You
guess.
know,
Bury it with
it,
Leia. I don't know.
the way I read it, it
This
was just we're putting it here so we can, if we do another, when we do another trilogy, we know exactly where they are and we can reference them again and pick them up so we can keep using them. Like, you know, when Kylo Ren throws his lightsaber when he turns good, you know, because
right.
it's just the flip of a switch. When he turns good, he chucks it into the ocean. And as it was flying in the air, in my head, I thought, see you next trilogy. Because I'm sure they're going to get it. You know, it's now it's known that they're going to keep referencing this lineage of this family forever.
Yeah, but it's also really, really annoying. So then the other thing that I'm wondering is, um, Ray trying to strike out and do her own path is sort of like, it's that whole bit about like, is found family really family, or are you like blood? Like, they don't do enough to make that really count. But I know that if you wanted to be lazy, that's or generous, I should say, that's maybe what you're going to say was a heavy thematic arc for Rey. They didn't do enough, especially in this movie, to sort of like bring that home, except for the final scene. But I'm wondering if part of it is that she wanted to find isolation just like Luke did, but she wanted to do it differently, in a place that maybe felt a little bit familiar. You know, it's a desert place, just like the planet where she was from, and it at least holds like some sort of connection for her. Honestly, in this way, she reminds me a lot more of Obi-Wan, than Luke. She feels like she's a lot better adjusted, where she is, which made me happy for her. And also she feels like she makes a lot of sense as a monk. Like, I feel like I get that vibe from her. Which maybe is the real reason why you don't get her and Finn. I still don't get her making out with Kylo Ren. That one is bonkers to me.
You know, if that was like the intent, right, to have them show that they have a close bond and that they're like I forget what they keep calling it, a dyad in the Force or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it would have made a lot more sense if I guess they were brother and sister, you know, or somehow that would have made a lot more sense to me than this like awkward way that they kind of connected them, because there was no like actual attachment throughout this trilogy with them, unless it was kind of forced there.
I think that someone told me that this rendering or this arc mimicked very loosely a brother sister, because Ben Solo had a sister, I believe, in the expanded universe or whatever, and so who was also force sensitive, and so I think that's what they were sort of like. Again, this is JJ winking, you know, at all the other Star Wars fans, like, hey, guess what? I'm giving you a little bit of something. You know, the whole movie was an Easter egg, and except it was empty.
Well, like, to me, it felt like a checklist. It's like, we need this to happen. We need to have this to happen. Where are things that people really like? Okay, this needs to happen at this one point. To me, it felt like, I think I texted you this when I watched it. I think I told you, I think this movie thinks I'm stupid. Because it didn't feel, you know, if this was like a fan servicey movie, I think there's a way to do it. And even in The Force Awakens, I think it was pretty fan servicey, but it was a pretty good way to do it. Like, hey, look at all the old stuff, but now we're gonna go to the new stuff, you know? Yeah,
but that's what I'm saying, is that it's like I I just don't think JJ's a great storyteller. Like it's hard to think of like a film start to finish that he was like super compelling with. Super 8 kind of. But see, that's the thing. Like I was having a discussion with friends, and I think that the difference with Super 8 is that he wasn't rebooting ET. You know what I mean? He wasn't rebooting Stand By Me. He wasn't rebooting the Goonies. Mm-hmm. He was taking all of those things that he loved and made his own version of it. Right. And it was interesting. It was very derivative, but it was interesting. It was warm. The nostalgia made sense because all the references weren't so referential to the other stuff inside of its own thing. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't him trying to erect references to its own temple. These were all references from other things, and so it's easy to fall into the nostalgia. But when you're referencing everything that came before you, just I don't know, like without linking or establishing the sort of like necessary narrative builds to sort of like create the emotional connection and momentum to get you there, then it's not going to happen. So yeah, I think that you're right. My thing is that I'm not really sure that JJ's I don't know. I don't think he's a great storyteller in that way. You know?
The whole movie felt weird because even those times where I thought, oh, they're going to take some risks, right, in this script, they didn't. Like in the first part of it, you know, they're light skipping, right, which we've never seen before, right? They're skipping the Falcon, and then at the end, the last skip, they're like, well, this might be the last one forever. I thought, oh, they're gonna just destroy the Falcon, and then they'll be like, this is the end of this, you know, referencing the end of the previous trilogy or the original trilogy, and then saying like, we're gonna go someplace else. Maybe I read too much into it, but I thought, oh, maybe they're gonna do that. And then they do it with Chewbacca, where they kill him, but they don't kill him because it's a fake out. And then they do it with C-3PO, where they're going to wipe his memory, and then they undo it. Like, it just felt cheap. Like, if you're going to do it, just stick to it. Don't just do it to do it. So, with all these things, that's why I kept getting so annoyed with the story, because every time I thought, well, okay, you're going to do something, they didn't.
And then I think that that's what diminishes the Kylo Ren redemption, because you had all those moments where they were tipping at a big death, a big death, a big death, or a big loss, a big loss, a big loss. And then you get this really cathartic moment where Rey bests him kind of on the cheap, but not, you know, like, right? Because she uses the moment that he's distracted to kill him. Distracted by hearing his mom talk. And
tag team.
Yeah, you know, and then sort of like, nope, whoop, you know, they bring back that Rey can actually heal. And then, you know, obviously it should make sense, because if Rey can heal, then, you know, Kylo can as well. But I'm annoyed by a lot of this, but we've got to be clear. It's not a dyad. Rey is singularly better than Kylo. Like, she's more powerful, like, than he is. She bested him in like every possible like fight that they'd been in, and saved his butt, you know, multiple times. The one time, you know, she got saved was that, you know. And so I mean, I guess if I want to be generous, maybe they needed Rey to heal him in order to make sure that she doesn't turn to the dark side, because we're supposed to be feeling that she's kind of wishy-washy too. But I don't think that I don't think that her killing Kylo would have spoken to me as a turn to the dark side either. And so like I just don't think they understood the stakes. Again, it's bad storytelling because I don't think they understood what that would have meant or how that would have read to other people.
Yeah,
So
I don't know. It just Star Wars kind of feels if this is what we're going to take every single trilogy, it's boring to me. If there's going to be an established big bad guy and at the end he's going to get redeemed, then what are you doing? You know, are these stories really worth telling, or are you just trying to make a quick buck off of nostalgia?
yeah, I mean, that's always been, you know, sort of my thing. I think we talked about it a little bit during this Toy Story um, episode. I've been really working very hard not to, um, because, you know, especially we're both creatives. Like, we don't want to be, or I don't want to be. I should say that I don't want to be the type of creative that's like, do we need this particular piece of art in the world right now, like, or do we need to regurgitate it? Because it's like, you know, if there's a story to be told, there's a story to be told. You
Right.
know, we can debate if it handled the execution correctly. We can debate all those other things, but you know, like, maybe the story just needed to be told, or you know, that, like, that's not my judgment to make. You know, because if I do that, then I'm gonna start saying, yeah, you know, maybe I don't want to write this story, and that's a whole other dark hole to fall into. That being said, yeah, you know, my long concern had always been that for these big franchises, that you're going to continue to get things with diminishing returns, simply because you're not going to either invest in the kind of transcendent talent that you might want, you know, for films like this, or you're not going to be willing to take the risks, you know, needed to really push it, you know, into something else. You know, I think a lot about Winter Soldier, you know, and the way that film really feels different from the rest of the Marvel, the MCU films, but still manages to sit inside of it because, you know, there's a broad understanding of what the universe looks like. Same thing with Black Panther. Black Panther as a film is like this. It really pushes the boundaries of what you expect in a superhero film in general, you know. And they're allowed to take risks there. Chris Nolan with the Dark Knight series, like, you've got people who can really do things with these well-known properties if you allow them to take risks. But you know, that's the part, is that it's like JJ always plays it safe. You know.
And honestly, I think that was their take to hire Rian Johnson. That was like, okay, we're going to try to do something different, right? And again, I'm not saying that The Last Jedi is like this amazing movie and, you know, what every movie should be, but it took some risks. And I think it was a great template, or a great way to start something and take it somewhere else. You know, it's like, we're going to take what's already established in Star Wars and then just spin it on its head and do something different. And then when they saw that, there was, I think, a very loud minority saying, no, this is not what Star Wars is for me specifically, then Lucasfilm was like, okay, sure, then we'll play it safe again. And I think that's why they hired J.J. Abrams again. And from what I read on, what's his name, the Colin Trevorrow's script, it didn't sound great, but it sounded different, just like The Last Jedi did. So he was planning on doing something different as well. Like, I think characters that got shortchanged, like what's his name, that officer played by Donald Gleason.
Oh, Hux.
Yeah. So Hux in this is just kind of like a giant joke, because I guess what people were referencing is like, well, in The Last Jedi he was a giant joke, but I don't think it was so much. I mean, he was the butt of some jokes, but he was still, you know, a serious character. In the movie that was not made with Trevorrow's script, he was supposed to be this big, like, Sith and Jedi enthusiast, and the reason why he's so bitter is because he wants the Force so bad, but he's not Force sensitive, right? So I think that's interesting. Not like amazing by any means, but I think that's an interesting way to develop a character. And in this one, there's just like, well, Hux is just like a mean little guy who doesn't get his way, so he wants everybody to fail. and so now we're going to make him a traitor, and he gets killed.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it seems sloppy.
Yeah, it's that, but that's sort of, I think, that what you get with when you decide to try and play it safe, like art, not to get so like abstract and sort of like esoteric, but I feel like art sits first at honesty. And if that's the case, then I don't think JJ was honest with himself about what these characters really were. Kylo Ren's not a hero. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You have to lean on that, especially if you're not going to invest in sort of like a real redemption for him. You can't shortcut your way to a hero journey for a villain. You positioned Rey to be a hero, and I think that Rian Johnson read that, found that more interesting, and that's why TLJ worked the way that it did. And I think that he just misread so many of the potential of the characters that's where you end up with, like, if this is playing it safe, like, man, yeah, but also it's just about what you would expect from JJ, unfortunately. And so I think that was maybe like the final thing, is that it's like I got done with that film and I was just exhausted because it was a lot to take in, and it was nothing that I didn't expect in a way, just seeing what JJ had done in previous films. So I don't know, it's unfortunate. It's really really bad.
I mean, and that kind of circles back to what we talked about in the beginning, where they have hired Taika to do a Star Wars film. I don't know if it's supposed to be a trilogy or it's supposed to be a continuation, but he's been tapped to direct a Star Wars film, and I don't know how to feel about that, because Taika is like a very specific kind of director, and I don't know if Star Wars or Lucasfilms as a whole is willing to make a Taika movie, if that makes any sense. Because he directed the last episode of The Mandalorian, and it was very apparent that he directed that episode because it had a lot of comedic elements. And The Mandalorian, throughout the episodes, it was a pretty serious show with a little bit of humor here and there, but that episode was very, very Taika. So them hiring Taika doesn't really give me a lot of hope, but I hope that I'm wrong, because I think he tells stories in an interesting way.
I think that maybe they're buoyed by the fact that people really responded well to The Mandalorian in general. I think that's the thing to sort of hang on to. I remember watching it and I was like, yeah, this one feels like Taika, and it didn't feel like it stuck out in a way that
same
was
here.
really obtrusive, right? So I don't also think I read a lot of backlash against that. My understanding is The Mandalorian is generally well beloved, and so maybe that's sort of like what did it, is they were like, hey, we got away with it in this small scale thing. Maybe if we give him a little bit of rope on this, kind of project and really help define it, then he can do it. I think that what I would be afraid of is if I was Taika and it was for multiple films in a sequence, that I get it in writing that I'm the one making those decisions. Because yeah, man, I feel bad for Rian Johnson in particular, because I think The Last Jedi is really fantastic. It's I don't know if it's the best Star Wars film in the Skywalker saga, but it's dang near my favorite. I think I would prefer it over every other Star Wars film, like even everyone from the original trilogy. I'm probably gonna get a lot of heat for that. I really enjoy where it goes and where it, like, how it broadens the universe.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I think my favorite Rian Johnson movie is still Knives Out, because I know that's like his full potential, you know, when he has no restraints. So I thought he did a terrific job with The Last Jedi. I know a lot of people were saying that it's not a Star Wars film, and I don't think it was trying to be like this, you know, this exact mold of like the original. And that seems like such a weird concept to me. Like, what is Star Wars? Like, because it seems very vague but very specific all at once. You know, I think a lot of
very
people.
weird. Yeah, I didn't hear that critique, and I'm glad I didn't, because I think that it just would have like blown my head apart.
Mhm.
Like, there are Jedis, there are
No,
Sith, there's,
and
you
it's
know, like
weird.
I don't get it.
It's weird because if I mean I know a lot of people don't like behind the scenes as much as I do because I watch everything. But with The Last Jedi, when you bought the movie, there was I think it's a 2 hour or an hour documentary on how they made the movie. And Ryan Johnson is like, it's like contagious the way he's excited about things. You know, when you watch like behind the scenes of Knives Out, he's super excited about Knives Out, and it's the same with when he was directing Star Wars. He was very excited for the script. He was very excited to take this in a new direction. So I did see criticism where they're like, Ryan Johnson does not know how to make a Star Wars movie, which I 100% disagree, because I don't think that's true. I think maybe he doesn't make your Star Wars movie. And again, if you really were to watch the original trilogy with like without the nostalgia, there's flaws, just like with any part of media. You know, no movie is ever perfect, but I think to put so much emphasis on what a franchise is you're really shortchanging what it can be.
Yeah. Um, for me, I think that the thing about like it really frustrates me, the issues that people say they have with The Last Jedi, because I feel like out of the sequels, it's the most comprehensive
Mm-hmm.
of every other film that came before it. It references and honors the way that Lucas tried to ground these big concepts of the fragility of freedom, the fragility of democracy, um, the way regime change happens, how it happens sometimes in the most mundane and sort of like hidden and subtle ways, and how that oppression usually falls on people that have nothing to do with that. And
Mm-hmm.
for all the things like that stuff is kind of really high level, um high concept type stuff, but that's sort of like why you love you know, these pieces of pop culture in general. You know, like you don't go to Lord of the Rings without understanding that the relationship between Frodo and Sam references the relationship between an English officer and his bagman in World War I, and that you know, Tolkien is talking about the specter of war and living under the specter of war and multiple wars, you know, within a short amount of time, and how,
Mm-hmm.
you know, sort of like these conflicts sort of emerge and always exist, and sometimes it takes like the most extraordinary people to, or the most ordinary people to make extraordinary decisions, right? Like these are all high concept things, but the thing is, like, if you didn't like the prequels, and there's a lot of reason not to like the prequels, but if you didn't like the prequels, it's because Lucas, for all of his really cool and awesome ability to nail the big ideas, couldn't figure out how to write those things into a film that would
Mm-hmm.
be watchable. Because
Right.
who's going to want to watch a Senate argument? You know, Ryan Johnson figured out how to make those things very vibrant. You know, like everyone talks about, like the criticism I saw was the Canto Bite sequence, that they were just like, oh, this is a diversion, it doesn't make sense. I thought that what was beautiful about the Canto Bite sequence is that it really drove home that there are people in the galaxy that are affected by this war and war profiteering and stuff like that. Um, and we pay them no mind in any of the
Mm-hmm.
films, especially in the original trilogy. Like, Lucas goes through so much to try and explain that all the stuff that existed in the original trilogy is because he's trying to make a point about how fast you can like fall into fascism and authoritarianism. And what Rian Johnson does is, okay, I love what George was trying to do in all of these things. Let me show you how it could look here. And he does it in a way that's far more effective than even Lucas could have done. And then what JJ does is he goes, and throws it out. Like, come on, man. Like that's the problem, is that it's like if you only ever want to see the A New Hope but with new characters again, then fine. That's what you're gonna get with a J.J. Abrams style script, and it's going to look clunky and it's going to be difficult to follow. But hey, like, good on you if you find that that's what you want. That's what you're gonna get. But the problem is, if you want something not just to sort of like push you into the next level, you're gonna need to take risks. And you're also going to have to be willing to let go of the preconceptions that you may have, about what makes it good,
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that, goodness gracious, like, even if like this film was entertaining, which unfortunately it failed to entertain me for most of the film, it also just wasn't good critically. Like, if you're gonna talk about important things like characterization, narrative cohesion, building a plot arc, none of it happens in this film. Like, it's barely a self-contained film, and it is definitely not a capstone for a 9-film, 4-5 decade long story. No, this is not how you end something that storied. And I think that providing that criticism, while it can be a little bit difficult to hear sometimes, I think that it's vital, because what are you going to do? What lessons can you learn as a creative from watching this film? I feel like a lot of the lessons from watching The Rise of Skywalker is kind of textbook what not to do, which is wild.
It's weird, man, because it almost felt derivative even from like Avengers Endgame, because there was a lot of similarities at the end that I found, with the ships all coming in at the last second, and then when Palpatine goes, "I am all the Sith," and then Rey goes, "I am all the Jedi." That's basically how Endgame ends, when Thanos goes, "I am inevitable," and then Iron Man goes, "And I am Iron Man." It's like they're taking the worst lessons from pop culture and then just merging them into this thing that just seems complete, I guess, but it stumbles at the finish line.
That's what I mean. Like, it just, for me, man, it wasn't even complete. That's the problem. It was half-baked the whole way through. It expected to coast on the nostalgia and the fan service, and because it went through so much work to try to ignore the previous, it couldn't even lean on that. Like, that's the part I think that's maybe the most like egregious. It's an empty shirt because it wanted so badly to make you feel something, while also undoing all the things that maybe could have added to it and could have gotten you to the points to make you feel anything. I don't know. Maybe there are going to be people who watch this and be like, I loved it. Cool. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. It was bad.
Yeah. No, same. I mean, I just wish it were better, because I genuinely like big blockbuster movies. So whenever there's one that comes out, I genuinely want it to be great. But yeah, this was just disappointing. So me knowing that there's at least other things in Star Wars that are pretty good out there, it gives me hope. The Mandalorian is great. I think they just got another season. I think they greenlit 2 seasons. I think they just started shooting the 2nd season. I think they just greenlit the 3rd. And I mean, I think seeing that each of those episodes were co-written by different directors and writers, and it still worked, I think there's hope, that maybe they'll find the formula for the big saga movies eventually. But I think they need to have a plan, or at least have a vision.
Yeah, but see, I would say that that's the thing, right? Like you can import, or you can try to model how TV works and do it like a film. But the problem is that TV serial work for TV has long existed in that format,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not been the case for film, right? And so that's why the MCU is such a groundbreaking kind of experience, is that it's
Mm-hmm.
like you've never seen um, a studio house tent pole its way like this. And that's why, we talked about this when we talked about the Avengers last year. Even for someone like me that felt like it was eventually like a little bit overwhelming and exhausting to have all of that, it felt like Avengers Endgame was a fitting capstone. Like that's a heck of a flex, and for all of its flaws, it at the very least served as a final and fitting kind of closing film over what was it, 23, 24 others that
Mm-hmm.
preceded it. Like that's a big deal. You're not getting that kind of cohesive unit even among this three in the
Mm-hmm.
sequels, and that's a problem.
See, and I think
I don't know who's in charge of that. I don't know who at
that's
Lucasfilm.
that's what I mean. Like Kevin Feige, he's like the big guy, right? And in Marvel, so he has like, this is the roadmap. This is where we started. This is where we're gonna end, and everything in between, we're gonna figure it out eventually. So with different director, we're gonna give them these points, and then they can do whatever movie they want within these confines, right? Sometimes great, sometimes not so great. And I think it's the same thing with the Mandalorian. The John Favreau is the big guy overseeing the whole story, and then he gets different directors to help him out. So even though it is TV, I think they're trying to do TV in a different way, to where, this is the big story, but each director can put their own spin on each episode within the confines that we already created. I think that's probably what Star Wars needs, like someone saying like, this is where it starts, this is where it ends, how do we fill this in, and how do we make it work in the middle.
Right. And that was what I thought that like Kathleen Kennedy was supposed to do. And so I'm just wondering if maybe like with the rollout of all the other Star Wars stuff, Rogue One, Solo, the now shelved Obi-Wan film, right?
Now
They
it's a
didn't film that,
series.
did it? Oh, but I thought there was a prequel for Obi-Wan too.
No, it's going to be, that's what the series is now.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Um, and so yeah, like the all of these like, oh, and then Rebels, Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
So like you've got all these like Star Wars properties that for a very long time weren't connected at all. You even had the extended universe in terms of the books, and then Disney had to sort of like sift through that and then indicate what was canon and what wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that they were working from a little bit behind the clock, but my goodness, man, like it I feel bad. I feel bad for uh everyone involved. I especially feel bad for the leads because they were the only ones that really held that film together, and
Yeah.
you could tell that Oscar Isaac hated his dialogue
Oh
so
yeah.
much.
A
Like it
hundred
was
percent. I mean,
clear.
well, especially because Oscar Isaac, he's very picky about the roles that he takes on. Because he's very excited about the. When you see the interviews of him from The Force Awakens to now, you can see just how much he is sad where the character got taken. Because even there's an interview I saw where they're talking about his character, and then he makes an offhand comment where he's like, "I should just let them kill me in the first movie." Like he says it in an interview. Like what happened to that guy who was so excited that he was in Star Wars that he went to JJ and was like, I really need to be a bigger part of this because he was so excited to be there. Or John Boyega, he was also equally as excited, but their enthusiasm for these films, they just kind of dwindled. And I don't know. Part of me thinks that if they eventually, which I know they're going to attempt to reboot this with these current leads as old leads for the next generation of Star Wars, I know that they might have a harder time getting them back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think they're going to have a harder time getting them back because, like, unlike Alec Guinness, I think what was it? There was a letter I saw on Twitter that Alec Guinness had written while he was on set during the first film, A New Hope, and he had indicated that he was unsure about whether or not this film was going to do anything. It did seem like it might have some cool visuals and some cool concepts, but the dialogue was atrocious and it was beneath him. He did say that he liked the young actors, especially this young Harrison Ford guy, if you've never heard of him. And so like it was just really interesting. But then the thing is, like, we know later on that the film ends up like doing bananas. And so it's like Alec Guinness kind of gets proven wrong. It's beloved. That's not going to be the case for the sequel trilogy. And so because of that, I don't know that anyone's going to ever feel like everyone's ever gonna feel like they have a real close tie, especially if they felt like they were hard done by. And both Boyega and Isaac in particular have been very vocal about how they feel their characters have been treated, which is like dirt in just the worst ways. I hope they liked what was sort of there for them in The Last Jedi, but I could also see Finn being a little bit upset because he was asleep for half of it. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
what a shame.
Well, there you go. The end of a saga. Hopefully the next is okay, or at least somewhat. I have hopes. Again,
I really like Rey's lightsaber. That was probably the best part of the whole thing. And then when she did the lightning thing, that was pretty rad.
Yeah,
that was it.
I think C-3PO was good in this. Never been my favorite character, but I think the comedic moments in that worked. I also really liked Poe and Finn, but I think I just like John Boyega and Oscar Isaac on screen all the time. So I was happy to see them. It was weird that at the end, all three of them were hugging like they were Harry Potter, Hermione, and Ron, when it was Poe and Finn for a while, and it was Rey and Finn for a while, and never the three of them. But hey, I'm not going to go there. Yeah. I was disappointed.
I feel like I'm fine with it because they deserved it for having to put up with all the bullshit. Like, it was just so bad. And especially,
and it's so weird because their chemistry is like palpable, but I'm telling you, it's not even the characters, it's them. You have this gold and you're doing nothing with it.
It is really egregious, and I don't know. I don't know what kind of, because obviously I'm not an actor and I've never done anything that high level, right? Or anything like that. So I don't know what a big name actor can expect in terms of input on a script. But also it felt like there was just no understanding of the characters. And I remember seeing the press junket interviews for this film a little bit, and you could tell like Oscar Isaac just did not want to be there.
Yeah, he was over it.
He was done. And I've loved how Boyega has used his social media to just flame the crap out of like Star Wars fans. Because they troll him, and I know they've treated him like dirt, so like, yeah, I'm just glad they got their checks and now they can leave, and enjoy a life that is not hassled by a bunch of folks who, I don't know, man, love something so much that they ruined it.
They loved it right to the ground, AJ.
Oh boy, that was the worst idea. I hated watching that movie. That was such a bad thing to do. Oh man, never again.
Till next time.
Nope. I will not. I refuse.
Did you
I
see
didn't
the interview of
actually.
Oscar Isaac where they ask him like if Disney comes to you and tells you we're gonna want to do an anthology series on Poe, would you come back? And right before they even finish the sentence, he goes, "Nope, nope, nope, nope."
Which is a shame because
Yeah,
honestly, like I thought Poe as a character started out cool. Finn as a character started out cool. Well, that was the thing. Like, you know whose arc was actually interesting in terms of redemption? Finn. He's a former stormtrooper. Like, I don't know. What a
I don't know. I don't
what a
know what they
bunch
were
of
doing,
weird
man.
choices. What a bunch of choices to make,
This is
man.
this is the last thing I'm gonna complain about. The last thing I'm gonna even mention. Okay, so Poe in this movie is revealed to have some, muddy past, right? But in the lore and the
He's a spice
canon,
runner.
he's a spice runner. But in comics, his parents are both fighters from the original trilogy. They were in the Resistance. I mean, they were in the Rebel Alliance. So how does he end up being a spice runner? Where's the connection?
I mean, if I'm being generous, then the connection is like again the fragility of democracies and the ways in which like ordinary people can be left out, which Ryan Johnson was hinting at.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that like they ever laid enough ground to make that work? No,
No.
no, no. I don't
Anyway,
know.
okay, we're done complaining.
Are we? I'm gonna write in my journal for 3 hours because of this. Um, well, that brings an end to that segment, whatever that was. Which means that it's back to our favorite segment every week, which is what is bringing you joy this week. And you don't get to say not watching The Rise of Skywalker.
Oh man,
So Lou,
you took it from me.
that is what is bringing you joy this week?
So what is bringing me joy this week? And I'm gonna keep it in theme because Disney Plus just released a behind-the-scenes documentary for The Mandalorian. It's an 8-part series. The first
Mm.
part was released on May the 4th, and that this one in particular is just a roundtable on all the different directors and what they brought to the table with each of their episodes, and kind of seeing like the ins and outs of how they came about to direct specific parts of their episodes and how their vision really dictated the way that the story went. And I thought it was really fascinating because everybody has very different voices. And there was, I believe, 6 directors. I don't remember everybody's name, but there was like 6 directors in this. So yeah, I thought it was great. So it's a high recommend for me. If it's each episode's going to be something different, like this one was about the directors, and the next one maybe if it's about like the special effects and stuff, because there's a lot of new technology being pioneered by that show. Um, like they have huge LED screens that they film in now, so it's not all green screen, so they can light things properly without having to key things in. So I think all that kind of stuff is super fascinating. So if you're into behind the scenes of shows or movies, it's a high recommend for me. So that's what bringing me joy. AJ, what's bringing you joy?
Um, not having to watch The Rise of Skywalker. No, so tonight, actually, right before we hopped on, we had family movie night here, and we decided to watch, continue my education and thusly my daughter's education of Hayao Miyazaki's films, and we watched My Neighbor Totoro, and I still think Kiki's Delivery Service is my favorite. In Spirited Away, the visuals are stunning, but this film was made in 1988 or released in 1988. The color choices, the palette, the details, they're just immaculate. There's no way that a kids movie should look this beautiful, and yet it is. And soundtrack's great. The story's really whimsical and sweet and warm. Yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's beautiful, and it's gonna make you feel good. I highly recommend this one. I was talking about a sequence in the climax towards the end, where you show one of the lead characters just walking through the countryside, and you see these wonderful transitions of various angles where you see the sunset, because obviously that side of the sky is going to look like this, and then they transition to a different part and it looks a little bit different in the sky, and all of the colors are just magnificent and brilliant. And again, it's 1988. Like, if you watch a film from about that time, like Oliver and Company, I mean, I love Oliver and Company, but it doesn't hold up like this. This is an immaculately beautiful film. So if you're just really into sort of like a film that looks good, watch this film. I think it's also one that'll make you feel really good inside after you see it. And then the other thing is, I just finished a book, a collection of short stories, which I think I've mentioned before. It's called The Paper Menagerie and Other Stories by Ken Liu. The stories just got even better since the last time I mentioned it, and it really is worth your time. So go help yourself to that, and hopefully y'all are taking care of yourselves. So yeah,
Nice.
That's what I've got. Thank y'all so much for tuning in, all 7 of you, the baker's half dozen. And hopefully y'all will tune back in next week. Thanks so much. Peace out.
Bye. Like and subscribe.
Oh, that's right. Like and subscribe. Here, click.
We're YouTubers, AJ.
Click this link.